From high atop Bramlage Coliseum, high atop Section 24, Dan Lucero from 580 Sports Talk here with you. What a night in Manhattan. K-State 83, KU 82, the final in overtime as Kansas State forces now a three-way tie along with Kansas and Iowa State atop the Big 12 standings. Both teams 5-1 in the league, both teams 16-2 overall after last night's finish. If you didn't like that, you don't like college basketball very much. All of the things that you love about the sport, starting with an intense and electric home crowd here at Bramlage Coliseum. If you've been hesitant to believe that the Octagon of Doom is back in full throat, tonight should have convinced you otherwise, that indeed this place was jumping from start to finish, and it looked like it was going to put the wind in Kansas State's sails all night as the Wildcats jumped out to a 14-point lead. But Kansas, a veteran bunch, they've been in games like this. It was just last year, in fact, they rallied back from 16 down at halftime to beat these very same Wildcats here at Bramlage. And they did whittle that lead down, got it to within 5 by halftime, and had a lead by the time there were about 8 minutes to play in regulation. But the two teams would trade buckets and free throws. Goodness, lots of free throws in this one down the stretch. The two teams combining for 77 free throws, 49 total fouls in the game. 4 different players fouled out, 3 for KU, 1 for K-State. So there was a lot of that. Some of the stuff maybe you don't love about college basketball so much, with the whistles and the video reviews and things like that. And certainly the home crowd felt like they got a raw whistle. KU fans at home probably felt about the same way. But in the end, we needed overtime here because down the stretch, K-State got a big stop, a strip at the top of the key, and very nearly won it in regulation. But Keontae Johnson couldn't finish against a contest at the rim on a one-on-one break that might have ended the game in regulation for Kansas State. So we went to overtime, and in the overtime, K-State made just one field goal, and it came from Keontae Johnson off an alley-oop from Marquise Noel. And if that gives you a feeling of deja vu, Cats fans, trust me, you're not alone, because that's exactly how the win over Oklahoma State a week ago tonight was punctuated, by a Noel to Johnson alley-oop. Johnson flushing this one in much tougher circumstances, going over the top of his defender Jalen Wilson to throw it down with two hands with about 25 seconds left. KU got one last possession, one last bite at the apple, but DeJuan Harris lost the ball trying to come around the corner on a screen, and the scuffle for the ball ran out the time as K-State wins it by a single point, snapping a 7-game skid in the Sunflower Showdown. They lost the last 7 in the series and 15 of the last 16. So this was a big one for Kansas State, not just in terms of this season, what it means for this season and this year's Big 12 race, but for the perception of the program, for the perception of where things are going under Coach Jerome Tang. This was I don't want to go so far as to say era defining. That feels a little grandiose and a little bit like a over exaggeration of what we saw. But as we are very early days in the Jerome Tang era at Kansas State, this feels like the first major blow struck for Kansas State, if there is to be a leveling out in what has recently been a very one-sided Sunflower Showdown rivalry. For KU tonight, they were fortunate to be in the game, to have the lead in the final minute, given a lot of factors. They shot it very poorly from behind the arc tonight, just 6 of 29. Grady Dick was 1 for 8. DeJuan Harris, who shot it well of late, just 1 of 6. And they also had 3 players foul out. KJ Adams fouled out, as did Grady Dick and Kevin McCullough. It was McCullough first, then Adams, and then Dick in the overtime. So KU had a lineup out there that doesn't play a lot together. They had to close that game out with Zach Clements and Bobby Pettiford and Joseph Yesufu, essentially a 3-point guard lineup on the floor with DeJuan Harris, and then, of course, Jalen Wilson. And speaking of Jalen Wilson, he was almost enough. 38 points for Jalen Wilson tonight. He was incredible. He got his in all kinds of different ways. Early in the game, it looked like he might struggle. It looked like he was maybe forcing it a little bit. But as he got into the flow and he started to get good matchups and get drives to the basket. He started to impose his will on the game. 38 points, a new career high for Jalen Wilson, including 11 of 12 at the free throw line. Also had 9 rebounds. KJ Adams was really good as well. 17 points for KJ Adams. Grady Dick had 16. It was a quiet 16 because, again, he was only 1 of 8 from the three-point arc, but he did make 7 of his 8 free throws. DeJuan Harris just 3 points, but 11 assists. Kevin McCullough did not score in 23 disappointing minutes. KU needed more from him as a veteran guy, certainly. For K-State, Keontae Johnson, 24 points. That's not new. Your best players have to be your best players in games like this, and Keontae Johnson was. Sat out some stretches due to foul trouble in the first half, late in the first half and early in the second, but he was the best player on the floor, had a big advantage in the plus-minus department when he was out there. He made a big difference. Also had 8 rebounds in the game. But it was not the two-man duo of Johnson and Noel who carried the way for K-State tonight. It was a rough night for Marquise Noel. 2 for 8 from the field, did not make any of his 4 3-point attempts, and finished with just 4 points. So he did have 7 assists, 4 steals, and 4 rebounds. And, of course, the assist on the game-winning basket. Found other ways to impact the game, but most nights, Marquise Noel only scores 4 points. It's going to be a struggle for K-State to get to the 80s, which is what they needed to win tonight. They got there because of a superb performance off the bench from Desi Sills. 24 points for the senior guard, 7 of 11 from the field, 2 of 3 from deep, 8 of 9 from the line. 24 big points on a night where K-State needed every one of them. Also a fine game for Naquan Tomlin offensively. He had 15 points and 10 rebounds. It was a tough night for him defensively. It looked like KU was hunting him on the pick and roll, but Tomlin, in 40 minutes of action, posted his first career double-double with the 15 points and the 10 rebounds for K-State. A wonderful game, a huge win for Kansas State, and just further proof that they are headed in the right direction under Jerome Tang, and they are not an early season fluke. They are in the Big 12 race for keeps. It's a 3-way tie atop the league now after tonight's action with Iowa State winning at home over Texas. The Clones, the Hawks, and the Cats all 5-1 in the Big 12 Conference. Saturday, both teams are at home, K-State and KU, that is. KU doesn't get any easier for the Jayhawks. 14th-ranked TCU comes calling to Allen Fieldhouse. K-State will take on Texas Tech. We'll break this one down tomorrow on our family of programming. Of course, from noon to 3, it'll be mic'd up with Jake LeBon and Fulton Caster. And from 3 to 6, yours truly, Dan Lucero with Brendan Dworzinski on 580 Sports Talk. We'll talk to you then. Until then, good night from Bramlage Coliseum, where one more time, the final score, Kansas State 83, Kansas 82, in overtime at the Octagon of Doom.